Welcome, everybody, to Practice Takeaways with Inside ND Sports. I'm Tyler James. He's the one and only Eric Hansen, and we were able to watch most of Notre Dame's ninth spring football practice on Saturday. This is the first chance we were given to do so and the last chance this spring. And the practice featured a lot of scrimmage action, so we wanted to share some of our biggest takeaways from today. Eric, what stood out to you the most?
What stood out to me the most was some surprises for me. Steve Angeli's running. All the safety talent, I guess I expected that, but it looked better kind of in person than I had expected. Jalen Sneed, again, you hear whispers about things, and to actually see it, see him playing so well and see him playing as a starter. And then just how diluted the offensive line was today. I mean, there are players that if you didn't have a roster, you'd say, wait, who's playing left tackle? Styles Prescott, who was injured all of last year, was the starting left tackle. And the second string tackle was a walk-on named Robbie Wallen. So, but it was really interesting to me, Tyler, because you really got to see the speed, you got to see competitive periods, and you started to see the building blocks of what this team could really be. Not anything conclusive, but certainly you got really strong impressions. How about you? What impressed you today?
I think in terms of what impressed me the most was probably just the way the defense sort of dominated. I think the defense was clearly the better of the two units, and that had a lot to do with what I thought was sort of an unfair offensive line defensive line matchup based on the personnel available. When you have so many offensive linemen sitting out, you added Gerby Lambert to that mix of guys sitting out due to his shoulder surgery. So you're talking about 5 of Notre Dame's 6 best offensive linemen maybe that aren't practicing for Notre Dame right now. And you get down pretty quick. Yeah, Matty Augustine's the starting right tackle in practice today, and he's a early enrolled freshman. And his backup is another early enrolled freshman, so Owen Strebig. So
and the backup right guard was Devin Houston, who was a defensive lineman not too long ago.
yeah, so the numbers are thin there on the offensive line, and that's why I asked Marcus Freeman with the first question today, like how does the offensive line and the inexperience you're dealing with there impact what you're seeing from your quarterbacks? Because I don't know that you're getting necessarily always the most even or most beneficial way to sort of judge your quarterback. Now, obviously, you want to see how they react to being pressured, but a lot of times there's a lot of disruption on plays. I don't know. It was 60-some plays. It felt like maybe a quarter to a third of the pass plays there was pressure. I did watch the offensive line and defensive line in one-on-ones while the 7-on-7 was going on. And the offensive line, I thought, held its own in that segment, but when it got to 11-on-11, I thought it was a bit of a mess. So that's not necessarily a concern moving forward, really, for Notre Dame,
Right.
because you expect to get all those guys back. But it's probably a good reminder, hey, going into the blue gold game a week from now, maybe temper your expectations for the offense based on the offensive line that'll be running out there.
I think one way that it also impacted the quarterbacks was they couldn't really run the ball very well. You didn't have Jeremiah Love in there, and then you had these makeshift offensive lines. So instead of maybe being 2nd and 4, it was 2nd and 9
Right.
and 3rd and 8 instead of 3rd and 1. So, and then CJ Carr, unloaded that 4th down pass to end the scrimmage, which was pretty cool. But that probably should have been an easier, maybe not even 4th down when he did it, but it was pretty cool to see.
So obviously everyone's going to want to know what we think about the quarterbacks. So what did you think of the quarterback play today?
I didn't think anybody separated themselves. And yet, so here's my impressions. I thought Steve Angeli, looked poised, looked about like I thought he would, but I thought he ran the ball better than I expected him. And he looked good. I mean, they can't tackle him, but he would run untouched and he looked quick and he looked decisive when he ran. Kenny Minchey was kind of what we've seen to this point of Kenny Minchey. Really exciting, extending plays, running lateral, was able to drive the ball down the field and also got intercepted. And then CJ Carr, I thought looked like, I mean, if you didn't know who was the veteran, he kind of looked like the poised veteran. I mean, he would check down to his backs a lot in the 7-on-7 drills, and he just didn't force things. And then he had a few wow moments, one in 7-on-7, a couple during the scrimmage. I think you even went wow when he threw that sidearm pass into a tight window.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth down pass, it was from around 28 yards out. Last play of the scrimmage, 4th and 9, a bullet to Elijah Burris in the end zone. So, and I'll say this for Blake Hebert, he does not look out of place out there. He looks like that's a guy that could be competing in future quarterback competitions. I mean, he was playing with the bottom of the wide receiver depth chart and with the bottom of the offensive line depth chart. But I mean, he, again, I thought for a young guy, makes good decisions. He's a big, strong kid with a good arm. He can run the ball a little bit. I like him. How about you? What were your impressions?
Yeah, I would agree that no one separated. I didn't think any of them necessarily played particularly great today. Obviously, the offensive line play impacted that. I didn't think the wide receiver play was as consistent as you'd like it to be either. You mentioned the 2 CJ Carr throws that I thought were the most impressive, probably the most impressive throws from anyone today, with that one to KK Smith that he sort of fired in there. It was just a 4-yard game, but it was like, wow, why did he even think he could make that throw?
Right.
And then the Burris touchdown, that was a play where the defense brought pressure because it was 4th and long, and he stood in there and gave Burris a chance, held on to it long enough for Burris to beat Isaiah Dunn deep, and was able to connect with him. He did have one ill-advised throw. He was trying to make something happen, rolling to his right, threw it down the sideline. Kennedy Urlacher nearly intercepted it. Fortunately for Carr, he didn't, but that was a throw he'd probably want back. Angeli, I thought, was up and down. The one, and it's funny because I've read what others have observed from today, and there seems to be disagreements on how much Angeli threw on target or didn't throw on target to a Cam Williams who was running open on a slant. I thought he clearly threw it behind him.
Oh yeah,
and made it a hard play for Cam Williams to do when Cam Williams was running open. So
I even said that to you.
Yeah, and
you were probably ignoring me though.
Well, no, I'm not. I just know that other people have said that Cam Williams should have caught it. So I didn't see it that way, but so I wanted to mention that. And you mentioned Minchey threw the interception that was to walk on Isaiah Dunn. That was an RPO throw that he sort of just telegraphed, and Isaiah Dunn completely read what he was trying to do and stepped in front of the receiver and picked it off. You mentioned the running. I thought Angeli and Minchey were aggressive with deciding to keep it and run in situations, and I think that's probably a reflection of the offensive line play as well. So not a day that it's like, okay, I know where this is going, but I think you can see the potential that all 3 of those guys have, and I think a bit why it's so uncertain how it's all going to play out.
Right. And we should mention Jordan Faison was playing lacrosse up in Syracuse today, and they lost. And Malachi Fields was watching practice and not participating in it. So some of their better receivers aren't on the field just yet. We didn't see – did we see Greathouse in the scrimmage? I saw him in drills.
I think we saw him a little bit, but not very much. I don't think that he took much contact in the competitive scrimmage part of it. There were a number of guys at different positions that were like that. I think Donovan Heinisch didn't take action in that portion of practice. Some other names are escaping me.
Smith wasn't in.
Yeah, Devontae Smith didn't do much at nickelback. had sounds like hip tightness or something from practice yesterday, and they want to make sure he's healthy for next week's blue gold game. So wasn't a all hands on deck scrimmage. There were guys that were being held out in certain parts of practice. So some other guys I wanted to highlight who stood out to me, Eli Raridon, I thought looked great. He had maybe one of the play or the play of the day, depending on if you want to give it to that Burris touchdown, where he caught a short screen pass from Kenny Minchie, I believe, and broke a couple tackles and made some plays downfield. Had some good blocking downfield. I think Will Pauling threw a block on that play, so that was a good thing to see. Eli Raridon's to show a little bit of that potential that we believe he has. I think you highlighted Jalen Sneed looking good. I thought he was very impressive.
He started at linebacker next to Drake Bowen today.
Yeah, and those two seemed to play together the most. It seemed like for the most part, those two guys were together. Kingston Viliamu, Asa, and Jaden Osbury were paired together most frequently today, but obviously they can mix and match those guys as they want. Sneed, there was one play early in practice where they just threw like a swing pass to Jadarian Price, and Sneed was there right away for a tackle for loss. It's like, oh man, he was ready for that. Bryce Young was impressive. Maybe helps that he's going against some young offensive tackles, but the future is coming sooner rather than later for Bryce Young, in my opinion, based on what we saw today.
Marcus Freeman brought it up in the press conference too about Jalen Sneed, that said this is by far the best he's been in any of the springs, and they had a talk when he decided he was going to come back for this this year to play at Notre Dame, and he said, if you want to be great, you've got to get into the details and do those kind of things. And Jalen Sneed is showing that it's not just the weight gain. He's put on some muscle. He's up in the 230s now. What'd you have him, Tyler, the other day when you talked to him?
I think he said around 235.
235. He's never been into the 230s. When he first came in, he was barely into the 200s as an early enrolled freshman. Mm-hmm. And so it's making a difference, and he's doing a lot of picking up with some of the surges we saw with him during the playoff run.
Looking forward, how does today influence what you're expecting to see next weekend in the blue gold game, and what are you looking forward most to seeing in that blue gold game?
Well, I need to get some kind of fancy calculator so I can figure out how much a first down is worth, because we're going to the Stableford scoring system, which is what they had today.
Yeah, it ended up being a 25-23 defensive victory, and it's going to be offense versus defense in the blue gold game next week. It was funny because that last play was a touchdown pass from CJ Carter, Elijah Burris. That was the very last play of the scrimmage. And the whole offense runs down to celebrate, and the defensive players are just pointing at the scoreboard because they were still up 25-23. There was lots of hooting and hollering back and forth about what the end result was.
Yeah. So for me, I'd like to see some of the players that we didn't see today. And it does sound like Devontae Smith, for one, is one we're going to see. It felt like last year when we saw this particular scrimmage the week before the blue gold game, there was a lot more insight that came from that than what actually came from the blue gold game. And it sounds like it'll be less revealing and so forth. I want to see the quarterbacks again and see if I can see anything different that I didn't see this week. I'd like to see the wide receivers again. I want to watch the interior defensive linemen a little bit more. I would catch glimpses of Jason Onye looking really good. Mm-hmm. I watched Hughes and Dawson, the two transfers. I'd like to pay attention a little bit more when younger guys like Brennan Vernon and Sean Sevillano and that group got into the game. I didn't watch them as much.
They had to have so many defensive linemen. It's hard to keep track of all of them.
You know who kind of impressed me every time I was watching him today, and I didn't watch him constantly, was Cree Thomas. It just seemed like number 20 belonged on the field. You didn't say, "Oh, well, that's a freshman cornerback." He looked decent. And then, of course, the safeties are really interesting to me. Tay Johnson is my new football crush as of today, but I do think Luke.
So I did you well by asking Marcus about
Yeah,
that.
you did. Yeah, but I mean, you did a really good feature on Luke Talich. I think he's viable. I think they'll play more guys around Schuler this year. I think they'll have a deeper safety rotation because there's a lot to like. Those two freshmen. I mean, we've you know drooled over, I guess, Jadon Blair and his 6'5" height, but Ethan Long is 6'3" and put together pretty well.
Yeah,
and I think he had a fumble recovery today.
Yes, it was a fumbled snap, and the ball was kind of bouncing around the ground, and he was the one to get his hands on it.
Yeah, and he held it up. So
he also leveled Jack Larson on a play downfield. I don't know if he needed to be going as hard as he was there, but I was a little bit surprised. I thought that
maybe he was coached up by Jordan Botello.
I thought that might like fire up the offense, and people would try to defend Jack Larson after that, but there were no pushing and there wasn't any pushing and shoving after that one. So I thought we might see that, but everyone's remained calm.
Right. I mean, things are just so much more under wraps. I doubt that we're going to see anything schematically that impresses us.
No, but I would say the fact that it is offense versus defense could be helpful in that we're not getting a first team tackle and a second team guard, even though they're all kind of second team as is. Yeah. But like to have guys that have been practicing next to each other throughout the spring is probably more beneficial, at least to maybe get a little bit better look of what those guys can do than what they have done in the past with the draft system. So maybe there will be a little bit better cohesion on offense and defense. But then the flip side is that, well, then you got all the good defensive guys coming at you too. So that's not going to make it any easier. So
I had a question for you when you were watching the offensive linemen, when they were not in the scrimmage, were like Billy Schrouth and Emil Wagner, were those guys doing anything in those drills?
I didn't spend a lot of time watching it. Basically, my information on that is off the photos that Jeff Douglas got for us today. I believe Billy Schrouth and Anthony Knapp were doing some things.
Okay.
But that was before. That would have been like when they're just doing individual drills with their teammates. That they didn't do any sort of one-on-ones, and then obviously any scrimmage action. So. I know Billy Schrouth has been dressed at previous practices. I don't know that Anthony Knapp had been. I think that was the first time we'd maybe have seen him in pads this spring.
Yeah,
we don't get to every practice either, so that he could have been in pads all week for all we know. So it does seem like those guys are getting closer. I doubt that they'll play in the blue gold game. It'd be nice to see some of them out there, but we'll see what Joe Rudolph and the training staff have in store for us as it relates to which offensive lineman will get out there on Saturday.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The blue gold game is practice number 12 at the most. If they have 10 and 11 this week, that's what they've kind of talked about. They haven't been real public about when these other practices are going to be held.
Yeah, that would have been a good question to ask Marcus Freeman today. I didn't consider that one. I was thinking about it after. I was like, oh man, we should have asked him what his practice schedule looks like moving forward.
Well, there are a couple that I heard that I would have picked out and
replaced
that one in. Yeah, put that one in for. But the one thing is, again, it's an unprecedented run through the spring. How they had to start winter conditioning so much later, modify spring to deal with having to get the full winter conditioning in. And so I think the good thing is that, a lot of these players have played before, and it does seem like they're doing a good job coaching them. But in terms of us seeing maybe conclusive developments on the team, I think we're going to be reporting on that more in August than we are in April.
Yeah, and that's, probably for the better, at least as it relates to maintaining the talent on your roster and not losing a bunch of guys that you don't want to lose in the spring. because the transfer portal will open up here later this month, and we'll see how that impacts Notre Dame moving forward, because I think it was partially because of the way the season played out. It made it a little difficult for guys, especially younger guys, to try to get out of here and transfer after the season when it ended so late. And so we'll see what sort of roster movement comes after the blue gold game, but it'll be interesting to see. There's always something that jumps out at you at the blue gold game that maybe you weren't expecting, and we'll see how the quarterbacks look. There'll be plenty of other storylines to come out of that, and we will have it all covered for you over at InsideNDSports.com. That'll do it for us from LaPorte and South Bend. Please hit the subscribe button and give us a like before you close out of this video if you haven't done so already. You can subscribe to us over at InsideNDSports.com with a 30-day free trial using promo code NDYT. We'll have more details, or we already do have more details from Saturday's practice over on the Insider Lounge. We'll have even more recruiting coverage coming out of the weekend. Notre Dame picked up a commitment on Saturday, and keep an eye out for our highlight video from Saturday's practice, which we'll publish on Sunday. And then, of course, we will see you Monday night for Football Never Sleeps.